So I recently decided to pick up Vinland Saga after dropping it a few years ago. I'm currently about halfway through and wanted to share my thoughts because now I totally understand why this gets the reputation that it does as a pinnacle seinen manga. The story is really not what you would expect from a gritty Viking manga, but I think that's also what makes it so special. I don't think Vinland Saga needs any introduction here, but for those who don't know, Vinland Saga is a grounded historical Viking drama that is easily on the Mount Rushmore of seinen manga, at least here in the West. Now, if you only read the first volume or even just looked at the front cover, you might think that this is because it's a very dark and gritty story. And while that is true, it's actually the story's compassion, empathy that sets it apart and makes it so special. Vinland Saga follows the journey of a Viking named Thorfinn, a man burdened with the goal of seeking revenge against his father's killer. Eventually, that no longer becomes an option for him, so Thorfinn loses his reason for living. Now, after the first arc, the story quickly transitions from an action-filled war story to drama on a farm. And I think that's where a lot of people, myself included, initially threw in the towel. But I'm glad I stuck with it this time because it's one of the most thematically rich manga I've read. Now, there's a lot that you can derive from this story, and the mangaka Makoto Yukimura has stated specifically that it's a story about violence. But in my opinion, I think the primary theme is about what it means to be a man. Vinland Saga has a strong basis in history, and Yukimura often notes that while he's fascinated with Viking culture, it was a very cruel, dumb society where most people died over nothing. This rejection of Viking society standards is best exemplified by Thorfinn's father, Thor's. He's an unbelievable warrior who for most of his life rejected his family, but after being shown love and compassion from his wife and kids, he does everything to make sure they don't waste their life through meaningless violence. He fakes his death to live out his happiness with his family, a decision that takes more strength than any kind of heroic act in battle. And there are also other characters who reject this idea of tradition and masculine values early on in the story. In one of Leif Erikson's early scenes, he talks about finding meaning in being something other than a warrior. There's this random boy who takes the opposite path and throws his life away just to go raiding and fulfill a meaningless societal expectation. In one of the early battles, Canut's army gives in to Thorkill's taunting after he challenges their manhood, despite their mission of rescuing Canute already being accomplished, and they pay the price for it. The true standout characters in Vinland Saga are the ones who have the strength to show compassion in a cruel world, not the cruel, violent Vikings who would fit the traditional standard of masculinity. And I know I'm far from the first person to point out the connection between Vinland Saga and toxic masculinity, but I'd really like to see this manga become even more popular and be up there with other stories for young boys like Chainsaw Man or Jujutsu Kaisen. We live in a world where young men are being constantly brainwashed by red pill content creators telling them that if they're not a jacked, women-hating douche, then they're not good enough. We need more media where the most badass character in the story says that being alpha is not what makes you a man.